Baltic Sea Adventure. Previously on Baltic Sea Adventure.
Hunt for U-479.
The U-boat...
Because the Enigma machine had an Achilles heel.
It was sunk on the 12th of the 12th.
Naval historian Jacques Peenemunde finds references to the lost U-boat U-479 in the German U-boat archives. This is the boat we are looking for in the Baltic Sea.
There is presently no known explanation for its loss.
Jack joins us for a tour to see museum ships in Bremerhaven.
Do you know much about the Wilhelm Gustloff? Not much at all. One I'd like to do.
We hear several stories about the biggest maritime disaster in the world. The sinking of German ocean liners Wilhelm Gustloff, General von Steuben and Goya at the end of the Second World War. An estimated 22,000 people lost their lives. English diver Lee Bishop tells about Gustloff. The Swedish diving team Tor, Per and Charlotta dive Steuben in the Baltic Sea. Our adventure along the Baltic Sea coastline continues. Tanya and Kimmo are crossing the Elbe River on one of its commuter car ferries. These wide rivers were the ancient superhighways before the roads and railways were built, and they still seem pretty busy to us. We arrive to the town of Lembit late in the evening and find it brimful of tourists, so much so that it's hard to find a hotel room. What we managed to get at the end of the day is a really nice room in an old fashionable hotel, with a view to the sights we came to see. Sometimes being last minute is a good thing. We met the historian and U-boat author Jacques Peenemunde at the Uboat Archive, and he recommended that we visit this museum boat. It's similar to the boat we are looking for, U-479, missing in the Baltic Sea. This U-995 is the world's only remaining Type 7C U-boat. Seeing one for real brings a few surprises. It's so small. When we'll be looking for one at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, it's going to be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Kimmo took the camera and did this bit of filming alone. He was lucky. There were no other tourists around at the time. It was hot and humid inside. Working and living in one of these things must have been a claustrophobic experience. Horst Bredow is a U-boat archivist and a Second World War German U-boat veteran. He tells about his life on board.
So the Baltic Sea was a very good room for training operations for the German U-boats. This training was very hard. Everybody, from the commander to the last sailor.
The sea moves in a most peculiar way, and you can't get away from it.
Yeah.
And he said the first time he was really seasick was when he was on a Type 2 boat.
A boat does not go so or so, it does go so, this way, yeah? And I was seasick. I thought I must die. It was always something to work aboard of a U-boat. And when everything was done, then we had Langeweile. What was it?
were bored.
I had always books with me. I read a lot. I was a young officer, a young watch officer aboard of my boat, and I had to learn a lot of the older comrades. So we had 4 hours of duty and 8 hours free, because this crew had 51 crew members. And we only had one toilet, and this toilet was always occupied. When it was occupied, then it was a red lamp, and when it was not occupied, then the lamp was out. That was a big problem, maybe.
So when not working, you queued for the toilet.
For example,
Everyone interested in submarines and U-boats must have seen the famous German movie Dustboard. It was directed in 1981 by Wolfgang Petersen and considered a realistic and a historically accurate movie about life on board a U-boat. What does Mr. Bredow think about the film?
this film was not made for us, for the U-boat man. It was made for the people.
Had they portrayed a real U-boat, nobody in the audience would know what was going on. Because many commanders didn't even speak, they gave orders with finger signals.
Sure. Yeah. Everybody aboard of a U-boat knew exactly what he has to do in every situation.
The Russian submarine Lembit, that claims to have collided with the U-479, was built by Vickers Armstrong in Britain, originally for Estonians. It is approximately the same size and speed as the U-479, and at least in theory, could have hit the German U-boat hard enough to cause serious damage. This German U-995 was built in 1942. During her career, she sank quite a few ships. At the end of the war, she was surrendered to the British and was then transferred to Norway, where she served as a Norwegian submarine. She was finally sold back to Germany for the nominal 1 German mark and became a popular museum boat. This massive Lembit naval memorial was first built for the remembrance of dead German naval soldiers of the First World War, but since the Second World War, it commemorates sailors of all nationalities who died during both World Wars. The day we were visiting, there were lots of Americans here. There are NATO military bases close by, but since the end of the Cold War and the dissolvement of the Soviet Russia, many NATO bases are being closed down. We came here for the view. The 85-metre tower of the memorial has an observation deck with fantastic views over sandy beaches, Kiel Channel and the Baltic Sea. The Kiel Channel is teeming with ships and boats of all sorts. Kiel is famous for its sailing events. However, this is just normal Baltic Sea traffic. On a beautiful summer's day, it's a hypnotising sight. The next day we hop on a commuter ferry that zigzags the Kiel Channel. You can find all the typical Baltic buzzwords in the history books of this waterway. The Stone Age settlers, the Normans, Vikings and pirates. The busy traffic and countless wars have created many wrecks. The Swedish diving team dive a Baltic Sea Wreck. The cargo ship Liljevalchs.
This is one of the bigger cargo ships.
Yeah.
It's over 100 meters long. It was sank during the Second World War, as a lot of other boats, by a U-boat.
And also Liljevalchs was carrying iron ore and was heading to Germany.
The Russian U-boat sent 2 torpedoes, tried to hit Liljevalchs, and Liljevalchs, they made a steep steer to the port side, but they still were. They got direct hit from the torpedo and sank like in 30 seconds.
Yeah. And it had a crew of 40 men, but only 7 could be saved.
As we said, it's a big cargo ship. It's 120 meters long. It lays in a maximum depth of like 65 meters or something. And the wreck is broken off. The shots you see on the film here, we are mostly at the area where the superstructure is, the bridge, and the stern is standing like almost 90 degrees up from the bottom, with like 45 meters as shallowest part, and then down to 55, 60, and the rest of the boat is like this, and there's a gap between them. The visibility isn't that good. It is not as good as Narvik, of course. No. Not as good as Westhusen, but
the bottom where the ship is, it's kind of like a clay sediment, very fine silt, so it stirs up very easily. One good thing on this wreck is actually that usually you tie into the stern and you dive there, or you tie into the superstructure and you dive there. But if you get lost somewhere in between, you have the smokestack, which is still kind of intact, and
but it's fallen down like backwards.
Or so if you find that, you know almost where you are.
Yeah.
Kiel Channel has been this country's main naval base since 1860s and the centre for German shipbuilders. This naval base is still in active use. You can see war memorials by the water's edge. Kiel was known as the war harbour of the Nazi Germany and was heavily bombed by the Allied forces during the Second World War. That round structure is a U-boat pressure chamber, where U-boats could be tested for faults and leaks before they were put to real use. To our surprise, U-boats are still built here, and the lost U-boat U-479 was built right here in these docks. At the very tip of the Kiel Channel is the city of Kiel, now most known for its renowned university. Back in our car, we travel to the former East Germany. Travelling from west to east, the landscape doesn't change a lot. It just comes even more rural. New roads are being built. It's hard to remember that less than 20 years ago, it would have been much more difficult to drive around the eastern side of the Baltic Sea, with many formalities and border patrols. Now, all of these regions are part of the European Union. We drive all the way to the tip of the Baltic Sea island Usedom, to Peenemunde. This is the famous German military and research base, where the V1 and V2 rockets were developed by scientist Wernher von Braun. You can learn all about the history of the rockets in the especially designated Rocket Museum.
Peenemunde is interesting, and you could possibly sort of talk all evening about it. It was originally an aeronautical research site. It was chosen because it was isolated, long way from anywhere, and you could make a noise there without the neighbors complaining. And that is where the Germans made their first tests with rockets, the V1, which flew over here in their sort of thousands or in their hundreds.
The much feared, destructive and silently travelling supersonic V2 was the first man-made object launched into space. At the end of the Second World War, Wernher von Braun and his expert team were swiftly snatched by Americans to kickstart the NASA space program. Many criticised this decision and saw von Braun as a danger to America because of his Nazi German past. But his defenders thought that he was not a politician, but first of all a scientist. And without him, NASA couldn't have developed its Saturn V rockets and missions to the moon and beyond. Nazi Germany was infamous of using so-called slave labour, and it's estimated that more people died developing the rockets than the actual fatalities caused by them. Now the base and the factories stand abandoned. The surrounding nature is absolutely stunning, and the holiday villages and recreational parks are creeping closer and closer. We predict that the ghosts of the past will be laid to rest soon, and this area will change dramatically in a few years' time. One more Baltic submarine museum, recommended by our U-boat expert Jack. Since the Second World War, East Germany was ruled by the socialist government, and as a reminder of the Cold War years, there was a Russian submarine museum here in Peenemunde. These Juliet-type subs were made in the 1960s to provide the Soviet Navy with nuclear strike capacity against USA aircraft carriers. They carried nuclear cruise missiles. There were grand plans for these submarines, but only 16 got built in Gorky, Russia. This Juliet U-461 is 90 meters long and sometimes stayed on patrol for more than 90 days, 3 months at a time. With more than 70 men on board, it seems really dark and oppressive inside. People who are interested in space travel also find submarines intriguing. There are clear parallels between the two. The almost complete isolation from the outside world. There's a good combination of these extreme elements present in Peenemunde. These maritime museums do an important job at preserving the history of shipbuilding. Most ships through history got deliberately sunk or scrapped at the end of their service years. It's great that examples of boats and ships of all kinds still survive and can be visited by curious people. Here east meets west. Her Hawaiian-style Trabant. These cars used to be the pride and joy of the East German car manufacturers. At least in England, the bright red poppy fields symbolised the fallen of the world wars. When we were driving this way, poppies happened to be in bloom. We journeyed back west, pretty much the same route we came. The town of Rostock lies directly on the coast of the Baltic Sea. It's always been the centre for shipbuilders. The Hansa cogs that cruised the Baltics hundreds of years ago were constructed here. The shipyards became a big business. Today it seems that the harbour itself is under construction. Rostock is a busy ferry port, taking travellers to major Scandinavian destinations. Another day, another ferry, this time to Estonia. We are heading towards the Estonian islands to start the diving trips of the northern Baltic Sea. Divers, underwater cameras and diving boat Pelagonia and the Baltic Sea Wrecks are waiting for us. Swedish divers Tor, Par and Lotta dive Charlotta Schroeder. It lies 70 metres deep in the Baltic Sea. During this dive, the water was crystal clear.
What's interesting with Charlotte Schroeder is that the ship's bell is still there, and I hope it stays there because most of the time the ship's bell is like a trophy for divers. The first people to discover and dive the wreck usually take the ship bell, but Charles Schroeder has a really nice, beautiful looking bell, and it's extraordinary to do the dive, and in the distance you see the bell. And
this is actually an awesome wreck. This is like normal size, maybe it's a little bit bigger than Augustus, so maybe like 75 meters long or something. Totally intact except for the bridge.
You see this kind of damage on a lot of wrecks in the Baltic. Fishermen fishing with nets or trawl, and they get caught.
Best information to positions for new wrecks is from the fishermen, because they keep track of every place they get caught with the nets. You can see some of the damaged part of the bridge. You can actually see the steering wheel under some trawl in the cliff in the shot. You can see the smokestack. That's really cool. The smokestack is actually standing up. This shot is really cool, I think, when you actually see the surface line, because this is deep. This is 70 meters on the deck of the boat. Yeah. So you can actually we have like ambient surface light at 70 meters. That never happened before.
No, it's very rare.
The visibility was crystal clear at this time. We couldn't. It was.
And also seldom you find a wreck with the smokestack still intact.
Right.
Because usually that's the first thing to fall apart on its own.
From the mainland Estonia, Kime and Tanya take another short car ferry to its biggest island, Saaremaa. Saaremaa is at the crossroads of the busy Baltic trading routes. There was a time when this island was the most prosperous region of Estonia. But during the last 50 years of Russian rule, these islands became the outposts for the Russian naval forces, and therefore were kept closed from the outside world. Even mainland Estonians needed a permission or an invitation to be able to visit. Saaremaa and Hiiumaa really became the islands that time forgot, and visiting them now is like travelling back in time. Swedes, Danes, Russians, Germans and Lithuanians have all in turn ruled these green islands. Many of them left their mark in its small towns and villages. Some of the buildings in the centre of Kuressaare, the main town, are medieval. Some were built in the Baroque style. Although small in scale, they are still impressive. There's a sense of history here. With its open position in the Baltic Sea, the local history is colourful to say the least. Vikings fought with the locals, Estonian pirates were much feared, and the Teutonic Order ruled over this land and almost most of the eastern and southern Baltic Sea countries during the Middle Ages. The bishop's castle dates back to the 13th century and the arrival of the German Teutonic Order and Christian faith. It's an impressive stronghold with underground tunnels, moat and drawbridges. It even had a central heating system. Today visitors can see the museum and art collections and enjoy outdoor events and concerts. It's the only medieval stone-built castle that has remained pretty much intact in the Baltic region. The ancient spa trade is booming, and the visitors are once again enjoying the healing mud treatments. There are miles and miles of sandy shallow beaches, and if peace and quiet is what you want, this landscape will suit you well. Saaremaa was known for its agriculture and for its numerous windmills. Now only some remain on the Windmill Hill. There are beautiful medieval farm museums, where you can see old reef roof farmhouses, and imagine the old way of life. It's easy to see how prosperous people must have been here a long time ago. A local curiosity is a group of craters. Biggest of them is Lake Kali, 110 meters in diameter and as much as 22 meters deep. The meteor that created these craters fell on Earth thousands of years ago, but this place is still rich with local folklore. It's the place where the sun went to rest. Kimmo shows how it happened. Back on the mainland Estonia, Tanja and Kimmo pick up their Finnish colleague, Kari Ketola. Car full of filming kit and everybody's personal stuff. We board the ferry to Hiiumaa, the second biggest island of Estonia. We had a drink and a meal on the commuter ferry, but our mood doesn't fit the scene. During the past few months, we've been doing a huge amount of work behind the scenes, organising the Baltic Sea diving trips. The Swedish diving team will join us later this month, but until then, we are supposed to explore the uncharted Estonian wrecks. Our Finnish friend Jari couldn't make it here because of his work commitments. Many other Finnish divers and members of the boat crew had promised to meet us here at Hiiumaa to join us on the Baltic Sea adventure. But just as many have cancelled or just plain vanished without leaving a message. At the moment, we are seriously understaffed. At the base camp, our first rental cabin, we start frantically reorganising everything.
And he says, yes, and he also said that he has a film light. And we don't have that many days. Probably going to be one wreck a day.
Things are even worse than we thought. The underwater casings for our high-definition cameras haven't arrived to Estonia, even though we've ordered them ages ago from the USA. They definitely should be here by now. And if the filming kit is not complete, we will have a hard time getting people to join us. But we had our mobile phones to try to solve the problems.
Good evening! We can start filming before the camera casings arrive. They should be here in plenty of time during this week. Yes. Oh, that's very well done. So he'll be here 5-ish.
The next day we go for a drive around Kadla, the biggest down in Hiiumaa. Just for fun, we drive past the holiday house we are supposed to be renting next, and it doesn't have any windows. How on earth will always be finished in time?
This is going to be our next bed and breakfast in 3 days.
Then the weather gets lousy, and our diving boat will arrive late. It's still in Finland, only a few hours away, but it can't make the crossing in the storm. Is anything going to be ready in time for our diving trips in a few days' time? Luckily from the internet, we find Kert Meidra from Tallinn, Estonia. He is a diving instructor and knows the Hiiumaa divers. Kert is willing to try to get his local friends to help us. As soon as the weather reports start promising better conditions, we hear that our diving boat Pelagonia is on its way from Finland. This is the digital video footage they shot during their night voyage.
Kuvataan vähän videoa. Pelottaako? Ei pelottaako? Tämä pituinen. Sinttu on kuskina siellä. Tiedetäänkö, kun me ei mitään aavistus, missä päin me ollaan edes? Passit leimaamassa ja kello on vähän vajaa 3. No, kohti Saarenmaata.
The crossing of the Bay of Finland is rough. Many members of the crew are seasick all the way. Only the old sea dogs manage to sleep well. The weather gets better, and when we meet the transit crew in the morning, the mood is already picking up. At the Lethma harbour, Pelagonia is snugly moored between the cargo ships and the sailboats. The owners of the boat Pasi and Jukka, with the help of their families and friends, have finished the renovation of the boat and have pulled many favours in getting it here in time. We get instructions of how to operate this old lady, Pelagonia.
Täällä on tää bensamittari.
Tää on se vanha versio Sony PSP:stä.
So this is how people entertain themselves before.
Mitäskö tästä tulee boss-level?
Ai, tästä tulee. Ota ja ohi.
Jumalaton kärpänet laskeutuu.
Voinko yhden vetää 2 kertaa?
Before the transit crew leaves, we go for a little ride with Jukka. Nearby there's a touching memorial for the children of the Estonia car ferry disaster. It's small and modest. The bell has a face of a small child on it. It starts ringing when the wind swells up to the strength it did in the night of the accident. On the 28th of September 1994, on its way from Tallinn to Sweden, car ferry Estonia sank in the storm just after midnight. The bad weather and the freezing cold water made the rescue operation very difficult. Only 137 survived, and over 850 died in one of the worst modern-time maritime disasters. Technical fault in the ship had been blamed, but conspiracy theories live on. Some say they'd heard or seen an explosion on the ship, and illegal munitions cargo on board has been given as an explanation by some. The official inquest continues. This incident is recent and tragic. People on board were just everyday tourists and commuters, mostly Swedish and Estonians, and a few Finns. The ferry lies only 30 nautical miles northwest from here, at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. It's considered a grave site and a no-diving zone. The transit crew of Pelagonia pack their bags. Now that we turn out to be short of staff, we are sorry to see them go. We take them to the bus station so that they can start their long journey, first through Hiiumaa and then through mainland Estonia back to Finland.
Joo,
We thank them and wish them good tidings. They must be tired, but still manage to look like rock stars.
Pitäkää hauskaa.
Back at the Lethma harbour, we start getting the boat ready for the diving trips and start loading on the camera and the diving gear.
Very good coffee.
Was it made by you?
Of course.
It seems that our Estonian diver connection, Kurt, is a man of his word.
We have a similar socket here, but we will need to get 2 feet out of it.
We meet his friend Martin Kagatse, a local diver, and soon his friends start appearing at the Lethma harbour.
Good.
Maybe tomorrow.
If only the American underwater camera casings weren't still missing. We meet Martin's friends, Andres and Andres. These guys are all successful local businessmen. Sports diving is their favourite hobby. It looks like they know what they're doing.
Tomorrow the second trip is arriving, that's all. Yeah. Yes. Monkey business. You're dealing with monkey business.
Yep.
Are you hungry?
Keret has asked the Russian Estonian diver and wreck hunter Andrei to come along. He knows everything about the local wrecks.
Mahala? Yeah, coffee. All in and then
three backs and then four forward.
Although everyone on board is familiar with the boats of the Baltic, operating this old boat takes some time to get used to.
Because there is a video about it, so it is a strange system for all of us.
There is an instruction video left behind by the owners, but on a boat full of men, who would like to see that?
You don't want to see a video.
You want?
Yes.
He wants to see the video.
Yes. You want to see the video?
Yes.
We can see the video.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. I'm just filming it. We have to film it first and then we show it.
Okay, we eat first and then we watch video and then we go.
Okay.
Okay. Upstairs.
Before diving, we go for a big time food shopping. It's important to be well fed when doing extreme sports.
Local body language.
Andres Lembit, nicknamed Lenin, turns out to be an excellent grillmaster. We seem to be getting along famously, despite the language barriers. Estonian and Finnish languages are closely related, but not quite similar enough for us to understand each other. Andrei only speaks Russian, and the Estonian guys speak some Russian as well. We all end up speaking bad English to each other, while Estonians try their best to translate it all to Andrei. Good luck to us all. Baltic Sea Adventure.